Commander Jake Morrison stepped off the transport shuttle and looked around. The space station called Harmony Prime was huge. It stretched out in all directions like a metal city floating in space. Lights blinked everywhere, and strange sounds echoed through the wide hallways. Jake had never seen anything like it. He was the first human to ever visit this place, the first human to represent Earth at the Galactic Council. He felt the weight of that responsibility on his shoulders. The station was full of aliens. Jake saw creatures he had only read about in reports. Tall reptile-like beings with green scales walked past him. Their eyes were cold and calculating. These were the Sauric, one of the most powerful races in the galaxy. Near a viewing window stood creatures that looked like giant insects. They had 6 arms and moved in perfect coordination with each other. Jake knew these were the Threx. They shared a hive mind that made them deadly in battle. Other aliens filled the corridors. Some looked like birds with bright feathers and sharp beaks. Others were made of what appeared to be living crystal that sparkled in the light. A few resembled walking trees with bark-like skin and leaves for hair. All of them stared at Jake as he walked by. Their looks were not friendly. Some whispered to each other in languages he could not understand. Others just watched him with eyes that seemed to judge everything about him. Jake knew what they were thinking. Humans were new to the galactic community. They were from a planet that other species called Deathworld. Earth was considered too dangerous for most alien life. The gravity was too strong. The weather was too violent. The animals were too aggressive. Because of this, other species saw humans as primitive. They thought humans were just brutal fighters who knew nothing about civilization. They called humans Deathworlders and treated them like hired muscle. At best, Jake reached the main conference hall. It was enormous, with a ceiling that disappeared into shadows above. In the center was a circular table with seats for dozens of delegates. Each seat was designed for a different type of alien body. Jake found his assigned seat. It was smaller than most of the others, which made him feel even more out of place. He sat down and placed his briefcase on the table. Inside were Earths, proposals for trade agreements and territorial boundaries. The other delegates began to arrive. Jake watched as each group made grand entrances. The Sorok delegation marched in wearing elaborate armor that clinked with each step. Their leader wore a crown made of what looked like the teeth of some massive predator. The Threx moved as one unit, their insect bodies creating a clicking sound as they walked. They took their seats without speaking, communicating through their shared mind connection. The crystal beings called Vorthik entered next. They moved slowly but with purpose. Light bent around their bodies in strange ways. When they spoke, their voices sounded like music played on glass instruments. Each delegation was more impressive than the last. They wore symbols of their military victories. They carried weapons that were works of art. They moved with a confidence of species that had conquered star systems. Then there was Jake. He wore a simple blue uniform with Earth's flag on the sleeve. He carried no weapons. He had no crown or armor. He looked exactly like what he was, a representative from a small, unknown planet on the edge of civilized space. The session began with opening statements. Each delegate spoke about their species, achievements. The Sorok ambassador talked about their conquest fleets that had taken over 12 solar systems. The Threx representative mentioned their perfect battle coordination that had never lost a war. The bird-like Aryans boasted about their speed and agility in combat. The tree-like Sylvanoids spoke of their ability to regrow lost limbs during battle. Each species tried to impress the others with tales of their warrior culture. When it was Jake's turn to speak, the room fell silent. All eyes turned to him. He stood up slowly and looked around the table. He could see doubt and amusement in many of the alien faces. Earth is honored to be here. Jake said simply. "We hope to build peaceful relationships with all species represented today." That was it. No boasts about military might. No tales of conquest. Just a simple statement about wanting peace. The silence that followed was uncomfortable. Jake could hear whispers starting around the table. He caught a few words in languages he understood. Weak, soft, pathetic. Ambassador Kethvar of the Sorak was the first to speak openly. His voice was like gravel grinding together. "Tell me, human, what great battles has your species won? What enemies have you conquered?" Jake remained calm. "We have fought many wars on our world, but we are here to discuss peace, not war." This answer seemed to amuse Kethvar. His lips pulled back to show rows of sharp teeth in what might have been a smile. "Of course you want to discuss peace. Weaklings always do when they meet real warriors." Laughter rippled around the table. Not all the delegates joined in, but many did. Jake felt heat rise in his cheeks, but kept his expression neutral. A Vorthic delegate spoke next. Its voice rang like a bell. "We have studied your world, human. Your apex predators are merely large cats and bears. How dangerous can a species be when those are the most fearsome creatures on their planet?" More laughter followed. Jake took a sip of coffee from his cup and said nothing. His silence seemed to encourage the aliens to become bolder with their insults. The session continued with discussions of trade routes and territorial disputes. But throughout it all, Jake noticed the other delegates making jokes about humans. They spoke just loud enough for him to hear. They questioned how Earth had even developed space travel. They wondered if humans were smart enough to understand. Complex negotiations. Jake listened to it all with patience. He had been warned this might happen. Earth's military leaders had prepared him for the possibility that other species would not take humans seriously. As the day wore on, the mockery became more direct. During breaks between sessions, small groups of aliens would approach Jake. They would ask him about human military capabilities with barely hidden amusement. They would comment on his lack of natural weapons, like claws or venom. They would wonder aloud how such a soft species had survived on a death world. Through it all, Jake remained polite and professional. He answered their questions honestly. He did not rise to their insults. He represented Earth with dignity, even as the galactic community made it clear they saw his species as inferior. But Jake Morrison was not just a diplomat. He was a veteran of Earth's military forces. He had served in conflicts that would make most of these aliens understand exactly why Earth was called a death world. And he had brought something with him to this station that none of these mocking aliens expected. As the first day of the summit ended, Jake returned to his quarters. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. And perhaps, if the aliens pushed too far, they would learn why humans had earned their reputation as Deathworlders. The second day of the summit began much like the first. Jake Morrison sat at his assigned seat while alien delegates filed into the conference hall. The whispers and stares had not stopped. If anything, they had gotten worse overnight. Jake had heard rumors that some delegates were placing bets on how long humans would last in the galactic community. The odds were not in Earth's favor. Most aliens expected humans to withdraw from galactic politics within a few years. Unable to compete with more advanced species. A morning session focused on mining rights in disputed asteroid fields. Jake listened carefully and took notes. Earth had valuable resources to offer, but the other delegates seemed more interested in mocking human proposals than seriously considering them. During the first break, Jake decided to visit the station's observation deck. He needed a few minutes away from the constant insults and barely hidden laughter. The view of space through the massive windows was calming. Stars stretched out in all directions, reminding him why this summit was important. He was not alone. For long, footsteps echoed behind him, heavy and deliberate. Jake turned to see a group of alien delegates approaching. Leading them was the largest being Jake had ever seen. This was Zalvin, a Krugan warrior. The Krugan were known throughout the galaxy as one of the most feared fighting species. Zalvin stood nearly 8 feet tall, with a body that looked like it was built for war. His skin was covered in natural armor plates that gleamed like polished bone. 4 muscular arms extended from his massive torso, each ending in hands that could easily crush metal. Behind Zalvan walked several other aliens. Kafvar the Sorak was there, along with a bird-like Aryan delegate named Skrivak. A Vorthic representative floated nearby, its crystal body pulsing with inner light. Well, Zalvan rumbled, his voice like distant thunder. The little Deathworlder stands alone. How fitting. Jake turned to face them fully. He kept his hands relaxed at his sides and his expression calm. Gentlemen, enjoying the view? Zal then laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. I am enjoying something, yes, but it is not the view of space. It is the view of you, human. The other aliens spread out around Jake in a loose circle, not threatening exactly, but making it clear he had nowhere to go. Jake remained still, waiting to see what they wanted. We have been talking about your species, Skrivak chirped, his beak clicking with amusement. About how you managed to develop space travel. Some of us think it was an accident. Others believe you must have stolen the technology, added Kethvar. Surely, beings as primitive as humans could not have developed it themselves. Jake sipped his coffee and said nothing. His silence seemed to irritate the aliens, which appeared to be exactly what they wanted. An excuse to push further. Z, Alal then stepped closer. Even with Jake being a tall human, the Krugan towered over him. Tell me, soft skin, what weapons does your pathetic species use? You still throw rocks at your enemies? We use various weapons, Jake replied calmly, depending on the situation. This answer brought laughter from the group. The Vorthix. Crystal body chimed like breaking glass as it laughed. Various weapons, it repeated mockingly. How wonderfully vague. Perhaps you use sticks as well as rocks. Zal then began to pace around Jake in a slow circle. As he moved, bone spikes extended from his forearms. They were as long as knives and looked sharp enough to cut through steel. These are my weapons, human. They are part of me. Born from my body, I do not need to carry tools like a primitive. The Krugan warrior stopped directly in front of Jake. I have killed over 200 beings in single combat. I have fought in the gladiatorial arenas of 12 worlds. I have never lost a battle. Jake nodded politely. That's quite impressive. Is it? Zalvan's 4 arms spread wide. Then perhaps you can tell me of your own battle experience? What great victories has the mighty human warrior achieved? The question was asked with such obvious mockery that even Jake felt his patience being tested. But he had been trained for this. Earth's military had prepared him for the possibility that other species would try to provoke him. I've had some experience with combat, Jake said simply. The aliens exchanged looks. Jake's refusal to boast or defend himself seemed to frustrate them. They had clearly expected him to either back down in fear or rise to their insults. His calm responses were not giving them what they wanted. Kethvar hissed through his teeth. Some experience? What kind of experience? Fighting small animals? Hunting insects? Earth has no real predators, Skrivak added. We have studied your world. Your most dangerous creatures are laughably weak compared to the beasts we face on our planets. Zalvan's bone spikes retracted with a wet sound. Perhaps the human is embarrassed to admit he has never fought at all. Perhaps humans are so weak that they have no warriors at all. Every human is a warrior, Jake said quietly. The statement was so unexpected that the aliens fell silent for a moment. Then the laughter started again, louder than before. Every human is a warrior? Zaldan repeated in disbelief. You? A warrior? You look like you have never seen battle in your life. Jake remained calm. He finished his coffee and set the empty cup aside. Looks can be deceiving. Prove it, Zaldan snarled. Suddenly, his bone spikes extended again, gleaming in the starlight. Show me this human warrior skill. Fight me. The challenge hung in the air like a physical thing. Jake could feel the tension radiating from the alien group. This was what they had been building toward. They wanted to humiliate him, and through him, all of humanity. Jake looked around at the gathered aliens. Are you issuing a formal challenge? I am. Zaldan's voice carried the weight of absolute confidence. Single combat, according to galactic protocols. Traditional weapons only. No energy weapons, no advanced technology. Just warrior against warrior. The other aliens murmured their approval. This was exactly what they wanted to see. The primitive human crushed by a real warrior. It would prove once and for all that humans did not belong among the galactic community. Jake considered the challenge. He knew what would happen if he refused. Word would spread throughout the station that humans were cowards who ran from real fights. Earth's reputation would be destroyed before humanity even had a chance to prove itself. But accepting was dangerous too. Zaldan was clearly a formidable opponent. His natural weapons and armor gave him significant advantages. His size and strength were overwhelming. Most importantly, he had genuine combat experience against dozens of different species. Jake thought about Earth, about the billions of humans counting on him to represent them well, about the future of humanity's place in the galaxy, about all the soldiers he had served with who would never get the chance to stand here. I accept your challenge, Jake said simply. The aliens cheered and began making plans immediately. News of the challenge would spread quickly through the station. Betting pools would form. Spectators would gather. It would become the biggest event of the summit. Cal then grinned, showing rows of sharp teeth. Excellent. We will meet in the main combat arena tomorrow at midday. The entire galactic community will witness your defeat. What weapon will you use, human? Skrivac asked with obvious amusement. A club? A spear? Please tell me you at least have something more advanced than a sharp stick. Jake smiled for the first time since the conversation began. It was not a pleasant smile. I'll bring something appropriate. The aliens laughed and began to disperse, already planning how they would celebrate after Zaldan's inevitable victory. They talked about the stories they would tell about the weak human who thought he could fight a real warrior. Jake remained on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. Tomorrow would change everything. Either humanity would earn respect through his victory, or they would be dismissed as worthless primitives after his defeat. He thought about the weapon waiting in his quarters, about the training that had shaped him, about the warrior tradition that every human carried in their blood, whether they knew it or not. Zia Len and the others had no idea what they had just challenged. They saw a soft diplomat from a backward world. They had no concept of what humans really were, or what they were capable of when pushed to their limits. Tomorrow, Jake Morrison would show the galaxy exactly what it meant to be human. Tomorrow, the entire galactic community would learn why Earth was truly called a death world. News of the challenge spread through Harmony Prime faster than Jake Morrison had expected. By evening, aliens throughout the station were talking about nothing else. The human delegate who thought he could fight a Krugan warrior had become the biggest joke in galactic diplomatic history. Jake walked through the corridors and heard the laughter following him. Groups of aliens would point and whisper as he passed. Some made crude gestures that he assumed were insults in their cultures. Others spoke loudly enough for him to hear their predictions about how quickly Zaldan would end the fight. In the Main dining hall. Jake sat alone at a small table. The food synthesizers could create meals from any species' home world, but Jake had chosen simple human food. A sandwich and soup reminded him of home and helped him stay focused on what was. Coming dotted nearby tables, aliens discussed the upcoming fight with growing excitement. A group of Sork were already planning a celebration feast for after Zaldan's victory. Erring delegates chirped and clicked as they described how they would spread the story across the galaxy. Even some of the more reserved species like the Vorthix seemed amused by the situation. The human actually accepted, one crystal being chimed to another. Either he is braver than he appears, or more foolish. Definitely more foolish, replied its companion. No soft-bodied species could survive against a Krugan warrior. This will be over in seconds. Jake continued eating his soup and said nothing. He had learned long ago that silence was often the best response to mockery. Let them think what they wanted. Tomorrow would provide all the answers they needed. A shadow fell across his table. Jake looked up to see Zaldan standing nearby, surrounded by a crowd of admirers. The massive Krugan warrior was enjoying his role as the evening's entertainment. There sits the mighty human warrior, Zaldan announced loudly enough for the entire dining hall to hear, eating his soft food and contemplating his approaching defeat. The hall erupted in laughter. Aliens from dozens of species turned to stare at Jake, who continued eating as if nothing was happening. Allah then approached the table and sat down across from Jake. The chair groaned under his weight. I have been thinking about our fight tomorrow. Human, I wonder what you'll bring. Please tell me it is not something pathetic like a knife. Jake looked up from his soup. You'll find out tomorrow. Ah, mystery, Zaldan laughed. How exciting. Perhaps you have some secret human technology that will surprise me. Traditional weapons only, Jake reminded him. Those were your rules. Yes, traditional weapons. Zaldan extended his bone spikes again, letting them catch the light. But what traditions could humans possibly have? Your species has only been in space for a few decades. What could you have developed in such a short time? Jake finished his soup and stood up. Guess you'll find out. The simple response seemed to frustrate Zaldan. He had clearly expected Jake to either brag about human weapons or admit defeat. Jake's calm confidence was not fitting the script the alien warrior had written in his mind. As Jake left the dining hall, he heard Zaldan addressing the crowd again. Tomorrow, I will show you all what happens when primitives try to stand against real warriors. The human will learn why the Krugan are feared throughout the galaxy. Jake returned to his quarters and locked the door behind him. The room was small but comfortable, designed to accommodate human needs. He had requested privacy for his preparations, and station security had agreed to keep other delegates away from this section. Jake opened his travel case and removed a long, rectangular box. It was made of simple black metal with no decorations or markings. To most observers, it would look like nothing special. But Jake handled it with the care of someone holding something precious. He opened the box and looked at the weapon inside. It rested in custom-fitted foam, every curve and angle perfectly supported. The sheath was dark wood wrapped in black silk cord. The handle was traditional white ray skin, bound with black silk in a diamond pattern. Simple, elegant, and absolutely deadly. Jake lifted the sword from its case and held it reverently. This was not just a weapon. It was a piece of history. It had been forged by his great-grandfather, a master swordsmith who had learned his craft from masters going back centuries. The steel had been folded and refolded dozens of times, creating layers that gave the blade flexibility and strength far beyond what its simple appearance suggested. The sword represented more than just metalwork. It carried the tradition of every warrior who had come before, every technique that had been developed and refined. Every lesson learned in battle and past, down through generations. Jake had trained with this sword since he was 12 years old. He had learned from masters who traced their lineage back to the ancient warrior schools of Earth. He had studied not just how to use the weapon, but why each movement existed, what purpose each technique served. While other species developed natural weapons through evolution, humans had developed something far more dangerous. They had created the ability to turn any tool into a weapon, and the discipline to perfect its use across generations. Jake drew the blade partway from its sheath. The steel gleamed like liquid silver. The edge was so sharp it could cut silk in the air. But more than that, it was perfectly balanced. The weight distribution had been calculated to make the sword an extension of the wielder's body. He slid the blade back into its sheath and began his evening practice routine. Slow, deliberate movements that looked almost like a dance. Each motion flowed into the next with practiced precision. Jake's breathing remained steady as he worked through forms that had been refined over centuries. Meanwhile, throughout the station, the mockery continued. In the main recreation area, a crowd had gathered around Zalvin as he demonstrated his combat abilities. The Krugan warrior sparred with volunteers from the audience, easily defeating each challenger. "Watch and learn," Zalvin called out as he faced an Aryan warrior. The bird-like alien was fast and agile, but Zalvan's 4 arms gave him overwhelming advantages. Bone spikes blocked every attack, while his free hands delivered crushing blows. The fight lasted less than 30 seconds. "That," Zalvan announced to the cheering crowd, "is what real combat looks like. Tomorrow, the human will face the same fate, but even more quickly." A Sarrak delegate raised his clawed hand. "What if the human brings projectile weapons? Guns? Or crossbows?" "Traditional weapons only," Zalvan replied. Those were the agreed terms. Besides, even if he brought such things, my armor would stop them easily. The crowd murmured agreement. Krugan hide was legendary for its toughness. Many species had tried to develop weapons that could penetrate it, with limited success. "What? About human military technology?" asked a Vorthic observer. "Surely their spacefaring capability suggests some advancement." Ildan's laughter boomed through the recreation area. "Have you seen their ships? Simple metal boxes with primitive engines. If that is the best their technology can achieve, imagine how crude their weapons must be." The betting pools had grown throughout the day. Odds heavily favored Zalvan, with some bookmakers offering 1,000-to-1 payouts for a human victory. Most aliens saw it as free money, a guaranteed win for anyone smart enough to bet on the obvious outcome. In a private dining room, several delegation leaders were holding their own discussion about the challenge. These were the real power brokers of the galactic community, the beings who made decisions that affected entire star systems. "This could be useful," mused Chancellor Vex Corin of the Hegemony Council. "When the human is defeated, it will demonstrate clearly that his species has no place in serious galactic politics." "Agreed," hissed Ambassador Prime South of the Sarrak Empire. "We can use this incident to justify excluding Earth from future negotiations. Why waste time dealing with primitives?" The conversation continued along similar lines. The alien leaders saw the challenge as an opportunity to settle the human question once and for all. After tomorrow's defeat, they could safely ignore Earth's applications for membership in galactic organizations. Back in his quarters, Jake completed his practice routine and began preparing his mind for battle. He sat in meditation, focusing on his breathing and clearing away all distractions. The mockery, the pressure, the enormous stakes, all of it faded into background noise. In this quiet space, Jake connected with something deeper than just his own training. He felt the presence of every warrior who had come before him, every soldier who had trained with sword and spear, every fighter who had faced impossible odds and found a way to win. Humans were Deathworlders, not just because their planet was dangerous, but because they had learned to become more dangerous than anything their world could throw at them. They had spent thousands of years fighting not just external enemies, but the very environment that had shaped them. Other species had evolved natural weapons. Humans had evolved the ability to create weapons that were far deadlier than anything biology could produce. More importantly, they had evolved the mental discipline to use those weapons with precision that bordered on the supernatural. Jake opened his eyes and looked at his sword one more time. Tomorrow, he would show the galaxy exactly what human tradition really meant. Tomorrow, every alien who had laughed at him would understand why humans were truly feared throughout their own world. The challenge had been issued. The combat arena on Harmony Prime was packed beyond capacity. Word of the challenge had spread so far that ships had arrived from nearby systems just to witness what everyone expected would be the most one-sided fight in galactic history. Circular arena stretched 50 meters across, surrounded by energy barriers that could contain even the most destructive combat techniques. Morrison stood in the preparation chamber, adjacent to the arena. Through the reinforced window, he could see hundreds of alien spectators filling every available seat. More crowded the standing areas, and holographic displays showed thousands more watching from throughout the station. The noise was incredible. Aliens from dozens of species cheered and called out bets. The sound created a wall of alien voices that would have been overwhelming to most humans. But Jake had trained in far noisier environments. He found the sound almost soothing in its predictability. A station official entered the chamber. This one was a neutral species, chosen specifically because they had no stake in the outcome. "Commander Morrison, are you ready to proceed?" Jake nodded. He wore simple combat clothing, dark pants, and a fitted shirt that would not restrict his movement. No armor, no protective gear beyond what regulations required. In his hands, he carried his sword, still sheathed in its traditional wrapping. "The arena has been configured according to galactic combat protocols," the official continued. "Traditional weapons only, as agreed. Medical teams are standing by. Do you have any final requests?" "No," Jake said simply. "I'm ready." The official gestured toward the arena entrance. "Then let us begin." Jake walked through the tunnel that led to the arena floor. The roar of the crowd grew louder with each step. As he emerged into the bright lights, the noise reached a peak that seemed to shake the station itself. The reaction was not what Jake had expected. Instead of cheers, he heard laughter. Instead of anticipation, he heard mockery. The sight of Vodzi, the lone human walking calmly onto the arena floor with nothing but a simple sword, struck the audience as the height of comedy. "Look at him," someone shouted in heavily accented Standard Galactic. "He thinks he's going to fight with that stick." "The human's already given up," called another voice. "He brought a museum piece to a real battle." Jake walked to the center of the arena and waited. The laughter continued to wash over him like waves, but he showed no reaction. He had heard it all before during his military service. Enemies always laughed right up until the moment they stopped laughing forever. The arena entrance on the opposite side opened with a mechanical roar. Zhao then emerged like a force of nature. The Krugan warrior had painted his bone armor plates with war symbols from his homeworld. Red and black designs covered his massive frame, making him look even more intimidating than usual. The crowd erupted in genuine cheers this time. This was what they had come to see. A real warrior, evolved for battle, carrying the natural weapons. That had made his species feared across the galaxy. Awi and raised all 4 arms above his head, acknowledging the applause. His bone spikes extended to their full length, gleaming under the arena lights like polished daggers. Each one was easily a foot long and sharp enough to punch through most known armor materials. The size difference between the two fighters was startling. Zal then stood nearly 8 feet tall and weighed at least 4 times as much as Jake. His reach advantage with 4 arms was overwhelming. His natural armor could stop most conventional weapons. His bone spikes gave him built-in weapons that no human could match. Citizens of the galaxy, the arena announcer's voice boomed through the speakers. Today we witness single combat between Zalvan of the Krugan warrior caste and Jake Morrison of the human military forces. The crowd cheered for Zalvan and laughed at Jake's introduction. The betting displays showed odds of nearly 2,000 to 1 in favor of the alien warrior. Several bookmakers had stopped taking bets entirely, considering the outcome too obvious to be worth their time. Combat will continue until one fighter yields or is unable to continue, the announcer continued. Traditional weapons only. No energy weapons, no advanced technology, no external assistance. Jake and Zalvan approached the center of the arena. The Krugan warrior towered over the human, casting a shadow that covered Jake entirely. Up close, Zalvan's natural advantages seemed even more overwhelming. Last chance to surrender soft skin. Zal then rumbled, his voice carrying easily over the crowd noise. Admit your species' weakness, and I will make this quick. Jake looked up at the massive alien warrior. I appreciate the offer, but I'll have to decline. Zalvan's laugh boomed through the arena. Your pride will be your downfall, human. But so be it. When this is over, your species will know their place in the galaxy. The two fighters moved to their starting positions. Jake stood quietly, one hand resting on his sword's hilt. His breathing was slow and controlled. His posture looked almost casual, as if he were waiting for a bus rather than preparing for mortal combat. Zal then assumed a classic Krugan battle stance. His forearms spread wide, bone spikes extended, muscles coiled for explosive movement. Every line of his body screamed predator ready to strike. The crowd fell silent in anticipation. The arena's artificial intelligence began the formal countdown. Combat will commence in 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7. Jake's hand tightened slightly on his sword's grip. His breathing deepened. Something changed in his posture, so subtle that most observers missed it entirely. But those few who knew what to look for saw the transformation beginning. 3, 2, 1. Commence combat. Zalvan exploded into motion with shocking speed for something so large. His bone spikes whistled through the air in a coordinated attack pattern designed to overwhelm any opponent. 4 weapons moving independently, each one capable of delivering a killing blow. The attack was perfectly executed. It should have ended the fight in the first second. Zalvan had used this same combination to defeat opponents from dozens of species. It had never failed. But when the bone spikes reached where Jake had been standing, the human was no longer there. What happened next changed everything. The galaxy thought it knew about humans. Jake Morrison drew his sword. The movement was so fast that even the arena's high-speed recording systems struggled to capture it. One moment the weapon was sheathed, the next it was in Jake's hand, its blade catching the arena lights like liquid mercury. But it was not just the speed that shocked the watching crowd into silence. It was the way Jake moved with the weapon. Every motion was precise, economical, perfect. He flowed around Zalvan's attacks like water, his sword work displaying centuries of refined technique. This was not primitive combat. This was not crude weapon swinging. This was art, deadly, beautiful art that had been perfected over thousands of years. Zalvan's second attack came immediately. The Krugan warrior was experienced enough to adapt quickly when his first strike failed. But adaptation required thought, and thought took time. Jake's responses required no thought at all. They came from muscle memory burned into his nervous System through years of training, the human sword deflected bone spikes that should have been unstoppable. Steel met natural armor and turned aside attacks that had never been successfully blocked. Jake's footwork kept him always in motion, never where Zaldan expected him to be. The crowd watched in growing amazement as the fight continued. This was not what they had come to see. The human was not being crushed. He was not cowering or running. He was fighting like something out of Legend.Z. Ali then pressed his attack with growing desperation. His bone spikes moved in complex patterns, trying to catch the elusive human, but Jake seemed to anticipate every move. His sword was always in the right place at the right time, turning aside attacks that should have been impossible to stop. "Impossible," whispered a Sarak observer in the front row. "Those are Krugan war spikes. Nothing can deflect them." "The human is not even trying to attack," noted a Vorthic delegate. "He is simply defending, but his defense is perfect." That was when Jake Morrison decided to show them what human offense looked like. The change was instant and terrifying. Jake's defensive movements flowed seamlessly into an attack sequence that had been developed and refined over centuries of human warfare. His sword moved in a silver arc that seemed to bend, light around it. The blade struck Zaldan's extended bone spike with surgical precision, not trying to break it, but redirecting its force. The Krugan warrior stumbled as his own momentum worked against him. Jake pressed his advantage immediately. His sword work became a symphony of motion, each cut flowing into the next with mathematical precision. He was not trying to overpower his opponent. He was dismantling him piece by piece with technique, so refined it looked like magic.Z. Ali roared in frustration and launched a berserker assault. All four arms moved at once in a flurry of bone spikes that should have torn any opponent to shreds. The attack was so fast and vicious that several aliens in the crowd closed their eyes, unable to watch what they thought would be Jake's death. When they opened their eyes again, Jake stood untouched in the center of the storm. His sword moved like a living thing, deflecting every strike with minimal effort. Each parry was perfect, each step placed with absolute precision. Zaldan's overwhelming assault met an immovable defense. The crowd fell completely silent. What they were witnessing. The hours following Jake Morrison's victory passed in stunned silence throughout Harmony Prime. News of the fight spread across the galaxy faster than light itself, carried by quantum communication networks to every civilized world. The impossible had happened. A human had defeated a Krugan warrior in single combat using nothing but a primitive metal blade. Jake sat in his quarters, methodically cleaning and caring for his sword. The ritual was as important as the weapon itself. Each fold of the silk cloth across the steel was a meditation, a connection to the countless warriors who had performed this same ceremony throughout human history. Outside his door, Jake could hear voices in the corridor. Aliens who had mocked him just hours earlier now spoke in hushed, respectful tones. The laughter was gone, replaced by something Jake had never heard directed at humans before. Genuine fear. A soft chime indicated someone was requesting entry. Jake finished wrapping his sword and placed it carefully in its case before answering the door. He found Ambassador Kethvar of the Sorok standing in the hallway, but this was not the same arrogant alien who had insulted humans just 2 days earlier. Kethvar's reptilian features were carefully neutral, but Jake could see uncertainty in his cold eyes. "Commander Morrison, may I enter? I wish to discuss certain matters regarding our previous ... conversations." Jake stepped aside to allow the Surak into his quarters. Kethvar moved with the careful precision of a predator who had suddenly realized he might not be at the top of the food chain. "I came to apologize," Kethvar said without preamble. "My comments about your species were inappropriate and based on incomplete information." Jake poured himself a cup of coffee and offered one to his guest. Kethvar declined, with a shake of his scaled head. "Apology accepted," Jake said simply. "I must ask," Kethvar continued, "is what we witnessed today representative of human combat capability? Or are you an exceptional individual among your species?" Jake sipped his coffee and considered the question. Every human child learns some form of martial art as part of their basic education. Most adults maintain at least basic proficiency in armed and unarmed combat. Military personnel train constantly in various weapon systems and fighting techniques. The implications of this statement hung in the air like a physical presence. Kethvar's eyes widened as he processed what Jake was telling him. "You are saying that all humans possess such skills?" "To varying degrees," Jake confirmed. "What you saw today is the result of specific training with traditional weapons. But the underlying principles, discipline, precision, the ability to remain calm under pressure, these are things we teach all our children." Kethvar was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried a note of something that might have been awe. "Your species has been preparing for war since before you achieved spaceflight. We've been preparing for survival." Jake corrected. "War is just one aspect of that preparation." Another chime sounded at the door. This time it was a delegation of senior galactic officials, including Chancellor Vex Corrin of the Hegemony Council and several other high-ranking aliens who had dismissed humanity just hours earlier. They entered with the careful formality of beings who had suddenly realized they needed to completely reassess their previous assumptions. Chancellor Vex Corrin, a tall being with blue-gray skin and 4 eyes, spoke for the group. "Commander Morrison, we come to discuss humanity's application for full membership in the Galactic Council. Recent events have shown us that we may have been hasty in our previous evaluations." Jake set down his coffee cup. "What kind of membership are you offering?" "Full voting rights, representation on all major committees, access to advanced technology exchanges," Vex Corrin listed. "We are also prepared to discuss humanity's potential role in galactic defense initiatives." The word defense carried special weight in galactic politics. Only the most trusted and capable species were invited to participate in military alliances. The fact that they were offering this to humanity after a single demonstration spoke volumes about how dramatically their perspective had changed. "There is one condition," added Ambassador Prime South of the Saurak Empire. His hissing voice carried careful respect that had been completely absent from their previous interactions. "We would like to establish cultural exchange programs. Specifically, we are interested in learning about human martial traditions." Jake almost smiled at the carefully diplomatic language. What they really wanted was to understand how humanity had developed such devastating combat capabilities. They wanted to know if humans posed a threat to galactic stability, and if so, how to defend against them. "Cultural exchange can be arranged," Jake agreed. "Though I should warn you that human martial arts are not something that can be learned quickly. They require years of dedicated practice." "We understand," Vex Corrin assured him. "We are prepared to make long-term commitments to such programs." Over the next several hours, Jake found himself in continuous meetings with various alien delegations. Each group came with the same underlying message. They had severely underestimated humanity and wanted to make sure they ended up on the right side of any future conflicts. The Threx offered military cooperation agreements. Deathworlder proposed joint research initiatives. Even the proud Aryans suggested cultural exchange programs that would have been unthinkable just days earlier. But perhaps the most significant meeting came when Zalvin himself requested an audience. The massive Krugan warrior entered Jake's quarters with none of his previous swagger. The defeat had clearly affected him deeply, but not in the way Jake had expected. "I have come to ask a favor," Zalvin said without ceremony. I wish to learn the way of the sword that defeated me. Jake studied the alien warrior carefully. Why? Because in all my battles, across dozens of worlds and against hundreds of opponents, I have never encountered anything like what you showed me today. Your weapon was not superior to my natural armaments. Your body was not stronger than mine. Yet you defeated me completely. Zaldan's forearms gestured expressively as he continued. You fought with something I have never seen before. Not just skill, but understanding. You knew exactly what you were doing at every moment. I felt like a child swinging sticks at a master craftsman. Training someone of your size would require significant modifications to traditional techniques. Jake mused. It's possible, but it would take years of dedicated study. I have years, Zaldan replied immediately. My defeat today has shown me that there are depths to combat I never knew existed. I cannot return to my homeworld knowing that such knowledge exists, and I chose not to pursue it. Jake nodded slowly. The Krugan's request showed genuine humility and a desire to grow. These were qualities that good warriors possessed regardless of their species. We can begin with basic forms, Jake agreed, but understand that the way of the sword is about more than just fighting. It requires discipline, patience, and a willingness to question everything you think you know about combat. I understand, Alzan said solemnly. I have already begun questioning everything. As word of these conversations spread throughout the station, the transformation in how aliens viewed humanity became more pronounced. Delegates who had planned to exclude Earth from galactic affairs now competed to offer the most attractive partnership agreements. The betting pools that had so confidently favored Zaldan were now being investigated by station security. Several bookmakers faced serious financial losses, and rumors suggested that some had attempted to flee the station rather than pay out the massive winnings owed to the few beings who had bet on the human dot. But the most significant change was in how aliens behaved around Jake himself. The casual dismissal was gone, replaced by careful attention to his words and movements. When he walked through the corridors, conversation stopped until he passed. Other delegates made sure to greet him respectfully, as if afraid that failing to show proper courtesy might somehow provoke a challenge. Jake found the transformation both amusing and somewhat sad. He had hoped to build relationships based on mutual respect and understanding. Instead, he seemed to have created relationships based primarily on fear. On his final day at the summit, Jake stood once again on the observation deck where Zaldan had first challenged him. This time, he was not alone. Word had spread that the human delegate often came here to think, and several aliens had made excuses to visit the same area. They maintained respectful distances, but Jake could feel their eyes on him. Some were probably trying to understand how someone so unremarkable in appearance could be so deadly in combat. Others might have been studying his movements, looking for clues about human capabilities. Jake's communication device chimed with an incoming message from Earth. The text was brief, but carried enormous implications. Mission accomplished. Returning home to brief leadership on new galactic opportunities. Recommend immediate expansion of diplomatic and cultural exchange programs. As Jake prepared to leave Harmony Prime, he reflected on what had been accomplished. Humanity's position in the galaxy had been completely transformed in a matter of days. The species that had been dismissed as primitive Deathworlders was now being courted as a valuable ally. But Jake knew that this was just the beginning. The galaxy had seen only a small sample of what humans could accomplish when pushed to the